It is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me is Mr. Maverick Currencies himself, Mr. Flat Earth Trading himself. It is Mr. Robb Reinhold.
Hey everybody, nice to be here, and this is going to be a very fun topic to talk about, so I'm very excited about this episode.
Yeah, it was fun for me. If you guys don't already know, I've done an entire dedicated video to this on my Trading Psychology playlist on nononsenseforex.com. On the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel. So why do it again? Well, I think it's pretty appropriate actually, because in that video you were only getting one person's perspective, and that one person was me, and I do not have anywhere near the perspective that Robb has in terms of being able to see actual men and women in the professional trading space. And that whole dynamic and some of the differences that he might have noticed. So I think this is a really great one to kind of bring to the Trading Psychology Podcast. Now, in that video I did, almost everybody took to it really well. I said, look, there are just certain advantages that women have, and they probably don't even realize it. One of the biggest disadvantages they have is they just really don't want to pursue this particular profession. And maybe there are certain things holding them back. I just want to let you all know, female traders, that you are actually better built for this than men are. And here are the reasons why. The female traders loved it, obviously, and most of the male traders understood, hey, this is not an indictment against us. This is saying, hey, there's a reason why women do pretty well when they enter this field, and it's because of X, Y, and Z. And maybe I should try harder to get better at X, Y, and Z. And so it was a really good success, but I wanted to go a bit deeper on it. And I guess before we do, Robb, I see on my notes here that you have some nerdy, sciencey Robb stuff to add to the equation. So by all means, let's go ahead and do that before we kick things off.
Thanks, Patrick. When we were putting this episode together, the one thing I kept thinking about was stereotypes. And, I'm not a big fan of stereotypes because with stereotypes, you can look at someone before you've really got to know them and say, oh, well, you are this, you are X. And that may not be true. However, a lot of stereotypes are built on statistical data, and this is one of them. And so I want to just, before we get into this, I just want to make this very clear that not all women are going to fall into this category that we're going to talk about, and not all men are going to fall outside of this category. I want everyone, if you are behind a computer, to Google the phrase binomial distribution. And I'm going to use the binomial distribution of heights between men and women. Now look, we all know that on average, men tend to be taller than women. But when you measure the whole population, you're going to get two bell curves. And what happens is the bell curve on the right is men's heights. The bell curve on the left is women's heights. They're not that far apart. They're only like 3 inches apart, 3 or 4 inches. And then you have this bell curve where there's a ton of overlap. So in this world, there are probably 1 billion women who are taller than most men. Or not most men, but at least a good population of the men. So I just want to start this episode to get everyone understanding that when we're talking about statistical averages, we're talking about traits that tend to come up more often than in women than in men. But this is not saying that this is across the board, all women have these traits, all men have these traits. I want to get really outside of gender and really talk about the traits that make a good trader. And women just tend to have more of those on average. So there's my spiel here. I've got tons of studies that we'll put in the description below the YouTube channel for anyone who wants to do a deeper dive on the actual science behind this.
And yes, Robb, through the magic of technology, we will also have that in the show notes of the podcast players as well, not just YouTube. But yeah, we will be making generalizations in this episode, but the root word of that is general. It's not specific to anybody in particular. So now that we have that out of the way, I wanted to start by reiterating one of the things I mentioned in that past video and get your take on this, Robb. To me, it's almost not something that women do in particular that makes them, in my opinion, better built for this industry. It's more of what they don't do. And so this is a lot of what you and I talk about on this podcast is a lot of these negative emotions and a lot of these negative desires that can really hamper male traders all the way through their trading career if we don't identify it, recognize it, and then attempt to do something about it. I feel like the majority of women out there don't even have these things to begin with, which puts them way far ahead. And those things are, things we've talked about before on this podcast, right? We have, with men, it's the desire for status and for money and respect. I think this is something inherent in almost every man, at least in the Western world, whether they realize this or not, and to varying degrees. Some people value money more, some people value respect more, but at the end of the day, we all want that sort of status. We all kind of compete with each other, and I think this leads to 90% of the emotional problems that we talk about on this podcast overall. And if you were to just eliminate those three things, I think the road would be a lot smoother. And this is where I've always felt women have a real advantage.
You are 100% correct. And I actually want to bring up some science into this, and I want everyone to go out and Google Machiavellian scale. Now, Machiavelli is the most famous of all narcissists. Everyone loves to bring him up when we talk about narcissism. But basically, there's a scale, a scientific scale, where you answer questions, and then you will be graded on where you are on the Machiavellian scale. Now, a high score says that you're very into yourself, you're very into status, money, respect, everything that Patrick just talked about. And if you're low on that scale, then again, those things don't matter as much to you. When looking at the differences between men and women, men tend to score higher on the Machiavellian scale and women tend to score lower. And when you take a look at the top 10%, it's very heavily skewed towards men. And if you take a look at the bottom 10%, it's very heavily skewed to women. So there is a scientific study about this. And yes, men care more about status, money, respect. And let's wrap it up in one name, ego. Ego is a huge problem in the world of trading, and men just have more of it on average.
And I wanted to kind of continue with this by branching off of what we talked about last week in episode 41, talking about envy, how there is this kind of siren song out there on social media of people who have made it right away and who are flexing this or whatever they're doing, making these claims. And deep down, we all know that they are probably false or probably very misleading, but because we want so badly to get there, and we don't know if we want to invest those 5 to 10 years trying to get there, because we might invest this time, Rob, and still not get there. That's always realistic. As men, sometimes we will seek these avenues out and fall into these traps. To me, I think it's a rite of passage. I think everybody, especially if you're younger and a male trader, kind of has to fall for one of these at least once or twice so you know not to fall for them again. But I've never heard of, at least they don't admit it, a female trader that has ever fallen for one of these schemes that are out there. Can you speak to that at all? I mean, have you seen any females that have? I've never once seen it happen. This seems to be again, here come the generalizations, but a 100% male trap that we fall into.
It's definitely not 100%, but it's definitely higher than 50%. I don't have any examples in my brain of this, but I do have a lot of men I know that have fallen into it. I just don't have any women in my brain. I'm sure it's happened, but there's no question that it's above 50%.
I think you're being really tame here. I think we can we say like in the 95 to 100% range?
I was
here?
thinking 80 to 90%. 9 out of every 10 people that get scammed is most likely a man. I'll go there. And it just makes sense. We talked about envy last week, and envy is completely attached to ego. And envy is, hey, I want what someone else has. And what that someone else has is what we just talked about: status, money, respect. And if you are high on the Machiavellian scale, then your ego is going to make it to where envy is just really high in you. And as we've said, men tend to score higher on that. It's just a bigger problem. As you said in the beginning, this episode is a lot about all the things that women don't even have to battle, which makes it easier. So definitely something to keep in mind.
All right. So yeah, I don't know if this is really branching off of what we've been talking about or not, but I wanted to bring this up because this is something I think I forgot to bring up in the past video I made. But being in Las Vegas for 15 years, I noticed a lot, and I almost always worked with at least one or two problem gamblers, whether they were open about it or whether they weren't, but it was still very obvious. It was a real problem, and I saw it firsthand. And I didn't just see it with people I worked with. I would see it all over the place, right? And I knew people in the casino industry, and they would talk about it too. And but interestingly enough, I could not find one example, either personally or through them, of a female problem gambler. So all of these things, so maybe not just on the Machiavellian side, to where what we aspire to, but just the defects we have that allow us to fall into something so horrible as becoming a problem gambler or having an addiction to it, just doesn't happen with the female species, hardly at all. Again, I'm sure if you look hard enough, you can find one or two out there. But this seems to be almost a strictly male problem. But I never really understood why. I can kind of rationalize all the stuff before, but this one thing I thought was a really interesting phenomenon, and I wanted to bring this to you, Rob, to see if you could provide any more clarity on it, because you've always been so good at doing that.
Well, I actually had to go out and study this and really to try to find out the root cause of this, because just like before, it's not 100% of men, but it's definitely higher than 50%. This is specifically a male problem. And, it's not clearly defined in scientific literature, but they have shown, especially in extroverts, that female extroverts tend to get their stimulus and their high through social avenues, friends, family, going out, like stuff like that. Where male extroverts tend to get their highs through internal stimulus, stuff like drugs, stuff like gambling, stuff like risk taking. And so we fall into these categories. And so for women, especially women extroverts, it's just not a desire for them to get their stimulus this way. And for men extroverts, this is the only way they want to get their stimulus, is through these methods. So again, it's not clearly defined by science yet, but we definitely have some studies that show that this is a male problem.
And so when you combine the two things we've been talking about, the desires that men traditionally have, and almost this hardwiring, how we're so much more predisposed to falling into these traps, well, then this explains a lot of how men are also more predisposed to the things that happen once we're sitting down in front of our computers. So over-leveraging, chasing losses, blowing out bank accounts but continuing to go anyway, which can be a positive if you eventually figure it out, but can be a big negative if you don't. So yeah, I think you take these things that can just absolutely destroy the male trader. I just don't see these things standing in the way of the vast majority of female traders. So I guess that was the main point of the video I made, is the path to success, even though it's going to be very difficult, we've already touched on that many times, is a bit clearer for female traders. However, the one thing, or there's two things in my opinion, that are hurdles for females more so than men, and I want to kind of touch on this too, Rob. The first one was just the natural, and I think this goes all the way back to the caveman days, really, of females naturally being more risk averse. So maybe something like using leverage, trading the Forex market, obviously doesn't appeal to them as much as it would, you or I. And Rob, you've seen so many people of both genders come and go within Maverick. What is your perspective on this? Would you agree? And why do you think this happens?
Well, thanks, Patrick. Yes, I do agree. And I've spent, 25 years looking over the shoulder of many, many traders, some men, some women. I've got to say that it's probably, 75% male traders at Maverick. We would love to have more female traders. And I got to say that my female traders, they don't give me problems. They are calm, collected. They follow their rules, follow their systems, and rarely do I ever need to really call them up. And so when we take a look at just why that is, you hit it right on the head. And there are many studies out there. We'll include a couple studies for you to look at. But women do tend to be more risk adverse than men. And I came across this one study that was very, very interesting. Whereas they took the study of men and women under stress. When men and women were placed under stress, what kind of behavior did they take? And the study showed that when placed under stress, men tended to increase their risk-taking, where women tended to decrease their risk-taking. So just think about that. In the world of trading, it is stress. You are placed in a stressful situation all the time with this outcome of real-world money. And when you place the average man in that situation, what do? They ramp up the risk. What does a woman do? They dial down the risk. You can just see it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that a woman, or someone who, not even a woman, but just someone who, when placed in a stressful situation, declines in their risk profile, you can automatically see that that person is going to be better at the job they're doing, which in this case is trading, than the person who, when placed under a stressful situation, they ramp up their risk. It's not rocket science. And again, this isn't even gender specific, man versus women. This is just, what do you do when placed under a stressful situation? The right answer is to be more cautious, not to go all out.
So to give an example, I guess, in actual trading, let's say a man and a woman both take a series of losses. Are you saying the man is more predisposed to say, ooh, I got to get that back. I got to get back to even, and I got to do it now. So let's go ahead and ramp up the leverage and try to get this money back, to where a female trader might say, ooh, I just took a series of losses and now my account's lower. I don't like this. Maybe I risked too much and I need to tone down the leverage instead of ratchet up the leverage. Is this a fair comparison? Am I close?
You're not just close. You nailed it. What happens is my male traders, or the people that increase their risk in a stressful situation, they go on what's called tilt. And we've talked about being on tilt. It's a poker term. It's where you've taken some losses and you no longer play the game how you did when you were calm and collected. That you go on tilt and you start to make dumb decisions. You start to make emotional decisions. 100%. When I get a trader who, again, has those characteristics and they take some losses, they take bigger bets. They try to get it back. Whereas someone with the other side of traits, mostly women, they're much more likely to actually halt trading and much more likely to say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to sit out for the next month or two and practice and make sure that I get it right. As you can see, for the longevity of a career, the latter is way superior and going to lead to way better results over time.
Which is interesting, because I've always said, because this is one of the biggest mistakes I made in the past, is when you take a series of losses, sitting out is not the move, because you're probably going to sit out at that very moment where the wins start to come back. I would say a more reasonable solution would be to do something in the middle. Don't leverage higher to try to get the money back. Just keep right on trading, because we, at least in No Nonsense Forex, we have a system that has tested out to, over the long term, succeed very well. And when it was back testing, it also experienced a series of losses, but you weren't there for it. So you didn't feel those emotions because they just weren't there. So I've always said, just keep on trading. So I wanted to point that out there, because I don't want people to think, oh, maybe the move when I start losing is just to stop trading. I don't think that's right, because I've done that. And usually when I jump right back in the pool, here come the losses again. And then I'm in a deeper hole than when I started. But I get what you're saying, though, Rob. At least in that particular situation, you don't have women blowing out their accounts, within the span of a few weeks.
Exactly. And the correct answer, yes, is always to follow the system, keep trading, keep swinging the bat. But I mean, just think about it. You got two people. What would you rather do if they were trading with your money? And in Maverick Trading's case, that is the case. They are trading with our capital. Would you prefer someone to ratchet up the risk when they're in a stressful situation or ratchet it down? There's no question. The right answer is to, again, if you can't, just keep doing what you're doing and be consistent. The correct answer is ratcheting down, because ratcheting up only leads to problems.
And if you just follow simple percentages, then that's what you're going to do anyway. So this works out really well. Now, the other hurdle I had for women, Rob, and I'm sure you can expand on this a lot too, is it's not even really a hurdle. It's just they're just generally not as interested in doing what we do for obvious reasons. I just don't think they're hardwired the same way we are. And something like trading just interests them a lot less, which is totally fine. I guess my main message to all the female traders out there, or aspiring female traders, is, hey, look, don't let that intimidate you, because you are actually in a better position from the jump than men actually are. So I don't know if that it inspired anybody along the way, or if they were already there, and that's the reason why they were on my channel watching my videos. I don't know, but that's certainly something that I think we can all agree on. Do you have anything to expand to that, or anything anecdotally?
I do, and I want to echo your sentiments. I would love to see more women get interested in trading, in finance. I think it is such a positive thing. Studies have shown the more diversity, like for Maverick Trading, as a trading team, the more diversity you add in, when you add in more females into the mix and other kinds of diversity, you actually get better results on the whole. So I would love to see more women get into the world of trading. And in fact, after the first couple of years of trading, I thought to myself, man, wouldn't it be really cool if my wife traded with me? And I thought, okay, she is not interested in anything. She is totally unmotivated by money. And it's one of the reasons I fell in love with her, because I've always been highly motivated by money. And I'm telling you, this woman could care less. And I'm telling you this truthfully. If we were to lose everything and had to move into a one-bedroom apartment, I think she'd still be just as happy as she was today, because it just doesn't matter to her. So I kept trying to get her into trading. She's like, no, that's what you're for. That's for you to do. And I'm like, okay, well, what can I do to get her interested to where she may want to do this? And I thought to myself, okay, she does like to do some shopping. So I actually set up an account for her, put some money in, and I said, hey, look, I'll help you in this account. And whatever money you make, you can do whatever you want with it. It's totally yours. It's up to you to do. And a couple of weeks go by, and she hadn't mentioned it at all. And I kept trying to say, hey, don't you want to do something? She's like, oh, we'll do it later. And couldn't really get her interested. And then one day we were walking in the mall, and, we're going down the mall deciding what stores to go into. I said, hey, do you want to go into the Gap? And she's like, oh, no, the Gap is terrible lately. Like, no one goes in there. Their clothes are terrible. No one's going to say, great, let's go home and short the Gap in your account. Now, she looked at me like, short the Gap? What does that even mean? So, I explained it to her. And so after we were done, we went back to our house, and we got into her account, and we actually went in and sold the Gap short in her account. At the same time, she says, well, I really like Target. Target's always busy. So we went long Target. And over the next couple weeks, the trades developed, and she ended up making money on both. Target was mildly profitable, but the Gap, it went down quite a bit. And at the end of it all, she had made about $1,500, and we took it out, and she got the money, and she went out and spent it. Exactly what I wanted to happen. Success right off the bat. She goes out, spends the money. I thought, oh, I've got her now. She's going to be super interested. A couple more weeks go by, nothing. And I said, didn't you enjoy that? Don't you want to do that again? She's like, not really. That's what you're for. So yes, I have firsthand experience that it's just not an interest for a lot of people. Now, this again is not gender specific, but when we take a look at the binomial distribution, there is going to be more women that are disinterested in trading than men. That's a fact, and that's just what it is and how it is in the world. I can't really explain why, but yes, that is absolutely a barrier, and I would love to see more women in the world of trading.
So A few things. One, your wife's a keeper, by the way. I think that story pretty much illustrates that part. Especially for men who are so, money driven like we are. The last thing we want is to have to sit there and compete with somebody on a day-to-day basis. We already compete enough in our lives. But before we get into the last part here, two questions as somebody who runs a prop firm. Be honest. Would you like to see a situation, just from a pure business profit standpoint, of a trading prop firm with 100% female traders? Do you think that would be good for your bottom line?
No. And again, all the studies show diversity in a group increases performance. And the Army and the Armed Forces in the U.S. have done studies about this. And the groups that are more diverse actually have better results. So no, I don't really even care about gender. What I'm more interested in is the traits. There are plenty of men who have these traits that we're talking about. Those are the people I want. I don't care. I want people with the right traits. I don't care about the gender, to be honest with you. I just want the right traits of people.
Okay. And my next question kind of does run into what we're about to talk about. Starting to talk about the positives, some things that are specific to women that they do. Not so much things they don't do, and I think we can go ahead and say this, a lot of the results, and as far as where people are in the firm and stuff like that with Maverick Trading is private for obvious reasons. But what we can say is some of your absolute top traders in the firm are female. So ladies, let that be a motivating factor too. You can not only do really well, you can skyrocket all the way to the top if you want. And maybe, since you've been able to follow these traders all the way through their journey, and you know so much about who they are and what makes them so great, if you can kind of maybe factor them in too, because I think people just in general would love to hear about some of the qualities of the top traders at the firm. But as we said before, some of the top traders at the firm just happen to be female on top of that. So if you can somehow weave that into what we're about to talk about here, and for all the listeners out there, what we're about to talk about is what I just mentioned. Things that women actually do specifically that really set them apart in terms of increasing their overall success level over time. In a game that's very hard to succeed in, these are some of the things that they specifically do that set them up for that path to success. So I think we can all kind of take a page off of this, but I'll let you take it from here, Rob.
I would love to discuss this. And again, I am completely gender agnostic. It doesn't matter. All I care about is the bottom line. And so, yes, we have some of our top traders are men, and yes, some of our top traders are women. And, we've talked about there are things that women have. And again, it's really about what you said earlier. It's women don't have to fight nearly the battles that an egotistical man would have to face. And so when we talk about what it takes to get to the top, study and thoughtfulness and practice. I mean, all of these things, and, patience. When you take a look at studies between patience, between men and women usually rank higher on patience. That is a huge part of trading. The episodes we did about how long it's going to take for you to get really good at this, we talked about years and years and years. I know men, and I'm going to throw myself in there in my 20s, I set myself back a couple years because of my impatience. It typically is just not an issue for our female traders at Maverick Trading. So again, let's just talk about the traits, gender aside, who cares about gender, but just the traits, patience and the desire to go through the process. It just seemed like women do that a little bit better.
Yeah, that's one of the things I brought up too, is that they're process driven, to where I think men are just interested in the quickest, most efficient way to get there. I always have to pull them back and say, no, guys, look, this is going to be a slog. So just make peace with that now. But there's also things you have to do along the way, like journal and testing and all of these other things, to where, most channels out there, most Twitter accounts never told you this. And I think there was a reason why they didn't tell you this, and it's for their own personal gain. But this is what you're going to have to do. And, a lot of people, we spoke to this before, how, have a lot of subscribers, but not a lot of retention. They just kind of lost interest. They're like, oh, this is the reality of the situation. Well, if that's the case, then let me go off in these other directions that might, provide wealth and success a lot quicker. It seems like what you're saying is women are okay with this process.
Yeah, they're definitely okay with this process. And one of the things that you mentioned that is just such a huge part of trading, and this is something that I struggled with so much as a young trader, and I don't anymore, but journaling. Our female traders tend to keep much better journals, much better journals. Our male traders, they throw it together because it's a requirement. And our female traders, they understand the process so much better and understand that journal is everything. So again, if you're having a problem journaling like myself, I really need you to fall in love with the process. I now can't wait till the end of the month to run my numbers. I love to run my numbers. It is one of the things that gives me so much joy. And then I run the numbers, I can be like, oh boy, I think I can improve this here, here, here. It's so much better to journal. So take that for what it is.
Yeah, I've told everybody, I'm like, traders, journaling is non-negotiable. You have to do it, or else you cannot expect to get better. Because the reason why people aren't getting better is because of trading psychology, just exactly what we talk about here, all these reasonings that people don't want to admit to. And when you journal and you fill out that comment section showing how you messed up, that is pretty much you admitting that you're not there yet. And that's really, really hard for people to do. Again, it goes back to our ego, especially on the male side. But if you can't map them out, then you can't eliminate them over time. So 3, 5, 7 years down the road, they're still going to be there. And good Lord, how many losses is that over the span of 5, 7 years? What has that done to your bottom line? It's crushed it. So yes, I got a lot of really good feedback on my journaling podcast episode a long time ago. A lot of them were from women, oddly enough. It's like, where'd you all come from? Why haven't I seen you comment before? And you're so right about that. And that's one of the biggest things, really, in terms of not just on a micro level, but on a macro level. They're willing to do these things that I just don't think guys want to do. And sometimes they just refuse to do over time. They think they can get there without it. And I don't think you can.
I totally agree with it. And again, it's not even about gender. It's just about doing the things to lead to success. It's just some of the things are very easy for us all that fit right in with our personalities. And then there's going to be some things that are going to be a struggle. And that's where the game is won or lost. I heard a great quote when I was 20 years old from a very successful real estate guy. And he said, Rob, here's the secret to life. Successful people do the things that unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. That quote that guy told me has really driven me in my life to be willing to do the difficult things. And doing those things is what leads to success, because the things that are easy to do, they fit right in your personality. And it's not a struggle. There's no struggle whatsoever. It's the stuff that is a struggle that you need to get on top of, because you have to do all the steps to get to the top. You can't skip any of them. Some are going to be easy, some are going to be hard. And journaling is absolutely one of them. It was difficult for me.
Yeah, I've said it before. Embrace the suck. Like there's just no other way around it. And this is also why, I don't want to branch off into this too much. This is why I think people don't see success until later in life. Because when you're younger, you just absolutely won't do this. But then over time, it just clicks for some reason. Well, what I wanted to do too is, because I've yet to hear any anecdotes or success stories or maybe unique things that your top female traders do that are maybe unique, or maybe it's something we've already talked about, but things that you've noticed that really have made them not only top traders, but top traders for so long in a firm with so many people in it. Like, that's really tough to do. Can you think of one or two things, either specific or more abstract, that you have noticed with these top female traders that we can share on the show? If not, that's okay. I'll edit it.
I would love to come up with something super unique and creative here, but look, success is success. And success comes from hard work, dedication, and paying your dues. And the manner that you take to get there doesn't really matter. There are a billion ways to trade in the Forex market. There's a billion ways to trade stocks. There's a billion ways to trade options. It's the route you take isn't the determining factor of your success. It's the traits that you have and the work you put in. And I've got to say, Patrick, that there is no difference between men and women in this respect. It's the same. They've all put in the work. They've all been dedicated. They've all managed their risk. And that's one of the things we talked about, that women do tend to do better, is to manage risk and able to stay in the game long enough to really, truly succeed. So I wish I had something magical here, but look, the road is the road. The path is the path. Men and women have to walk down that same path regardless of gender.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I was maybe hoping for one little extra piece of alpha there, but when it comes down to it, yeah, it's just the path is the path. Some people are better at staying on it than others. And that's where, I personally think, women really do have the advantage here. So on that note, thank you everybody for listening to episode 42 of the Trading Psychology Podcast. Rob and I will both see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.